All right, everyone, so let's get started. So I'm going to post the live link in this document as well. If you actually want this document in note form, just comment notes below to get this document in note form. And again, I'm going to continue with this format since I want to present some information. I think it's just easier for everyone to see, and we'll have notes afterwards as well. So the first thing we're going to talk about is shipping prices increases. So unfortunately, I'm going to give you everyone some not great news, whether you're current clients or just using China shipping lines in general. Shipping prices have been increasing and they will continue to increase. And there were a couple increases this week and going into next week. So general background on this is that, typically prices always increase in Q4, just because of higher demand and higher air freight costs. Because if you're using something like Yunexpress or 4PX or pretty much anything that actually directly fulfills from China, they're going to be going on a plane. And as the demand goes up, especially during peak Q4 season, that is when air freight prices go up. And also, and a lot of times, especially this year, and also last mile delivery costs tend to go up as well. USPS, Royal Mail, whatever you use, there typically is some increases there. However, this year is a bit worse because of the recent sea freight issues. I'll actually post a video here later, but if you're in this group, actually you can just scroll down, and it's one of the recent videos I posted on the sea freight issues. Because of the sea freight issues, currently, as you're watching this, beginning of November, it's already too late to send sea freight to the US or the EU in time for Christmas delivery. And that is way earlier than usual because of all these issues. Again, I'll post a link to the video here so you can see details there. But because of that, there has been much increased demand for air freight. Much increased demand for air freight and direct from China fulfillment. More demand obviously equals higher costs, cost increases versus usual years. All right, so usually we expect, now when I say usually, by the way, I'm talking about like before COVID, all right? Because last year obviously was a little bit unique as well, but usually before COVID, first of all, prices tend to be a lot lower, but before COVID, it used to be maybe just one price increase in all of Q4, and it might usually happen in mid-November to end November or so, and it's usually a pretty small decrease. However, because of all these issues, there have been more increases earlier than expected. There are actually some small increases in October already going into Q4, and we definitely expect that they will keep going up. So more increases this year than usual at a higher frequency. And also we definitely expect more coming as well. All right, so not good news coming up, and it's not going to be the best news going forward as well. All right, so let's talk about some of the rough impacts right now. So 4PX is increasing on November 4th. All right, so that's actually tomorrow if you're watching this on the 3rd. 4PX increases, let me actually do some math here because they're all in RMB rates. So 4PX increases roughly from roughly around 80 cents to up to $3 to $3 per kilogram increase, depending on country and line. All right, so this is a per kilogram increase. which means that obviously if you have a very light product, if your product is like 50 grams or 100 grams, obviously this is not going to affect you too much. And actually for current clients as well, if we do not reach out to you to increase your prices, then it's good news, right? It's probably because your product is actually still very, very light. And we do try to absorb, some of the increases as much as possible. But then obviously, if you have a much heavier product, if your product is like 1 kilogram, 2 kilograms, then depending on the country, it could actually affect you quite a lot. And now this is something that I want to be clear as well, whether it's us or your other suppliers, it's not your suppliers raising their prices on you. This is literally the couriers increasing prices on the suppliers, and they have no choice but to pass it on to you. And the couriers, actually 4PX, Yunexpress, they have no choice as well because they are dependent on the air freight costs, which means that this is something that they also can't control, or otherwise they'll just be losing money sending products out. Now, so that's 4PX. So they're going to be increasing on 11.4. Yunexpress, unfortunately, is also increasing. Is increasing between, let me just do some math again on this. They're roughly increasing anywhere between, okay, so they're increasing between from roughly 150 or so, $1.50 to, what is this math in RMB, to 250 to roughly 240. Sorry, to 230 per Canadian piece, depending on country and line. So, these again are relatively significant increases. And we've had a lot of questions recently about how do we expect the increases to continue going. We do expect increases to continue throughout Q4 until the Q4 holiday, until the holiday sales season is over. And a lot of questions I get are around how much do we think that there are going to increase? Do we think it's going to increase 5% more, 10% more, 50% more? Unfortunately, no one knows what the increases might be. I mean, that's just the nature of supply and demand in the supply chain. And I think that especially this year, there's even more uncertainty because of all these sea freight issues, the port backlog, and a lot of companies are starting to use air freight because they literally have no choice. And this is a year where air freight actually is, increasing prices sometimes by a daily basis. So, this is something that if you actually, for example, manage your own supply chain, if you actually ship your products outside into the US, for example, if you talk to a freight forwarder is going to tell you, well, if you ship it right now, it's going to be this price. If you ship it tomorrow, it's going to be this price. But if you're going to ship out next week, we don't know. It would just have to be the price. It is what it is, right? That's obviously if you're talking about like if you're talking to a freight forwarder who actually takes the market prices. Now, sometimes you might come back and say, hey, my freight forwarder, my supplier is saying that they can guarantee this air freight price for the next 2 weeks. Well, that's not really possible. And honestly, if they are actually saying that, then most likely is because they make so much margin on that shipping price that they can actually afford the price increases. But any kind of freight forwarder that is using market prices, they're going to tell you that the air freight price is increasing prices sometimes on a daily basis. So no one exactly knows what is going to happen here. All right. So that's going to be the direct impacts on the shipping prices again. So for current clients, we will obviously reach out to you if we do need to increase your prices. But if we don't reach out to you, then it most likely means that your product is very, very light. And, we're not going to try to increase 5 cents on you, for example. We'll absorb some of the increases as well. All right. Now, however, I do want to note you can expect decreases again after Q4. All right. So this is something that I can confidently tell you that because all of these increases are due to this peak season demand, due to air freight increasing in prices, I am 99.9% certain that like pretty much 100% certain that you can actually expect decreases in shipping prices after Q4 is over. Now, exactly when is uncertain because this is something that normally the prices is decrease in one go back to normal just immediately after Q4 sales season, like for example, like the 1st of January or sometimes the end of December even. However, because of this unique situation this year, I do expect the decreases to happen. However, we don't exactly know the exact date that is going to happen, and we don't exactly know if it's going to be a one-time thing. We don't know if it's going to be back to normal. We don't know if it's going to be a staggered decrease over a month or two once it slowly gets back to normal. However, just note that these price increases are not going to continue to hold over Q4. All right. Now, so what does this mean for you? All right. So assuming that you fulfill from China. So first of all, if you are not working with us, if you're working with another supplier, if you're not working with us, check your supplier for updated costs. All right. So depending on the supplier, depending on the agent, they may not actually update you in advance on these cost increases. They may not be able to adjust the prices quick enough. And actually, this is something that we've seen a lot, especially during the very significant price increases through the COVID period, where there were times where there were huge price increases. Your suppliers wouldn't tell their clients, and they would only tell them like after the fact, right? We had to ship out these orders at much higher costs. Or what's even worse is that they don't communicate it with you. They don't know what to do about the prices. And they actually, just without your knowledge, send it on potentially a cheaper shipping option because otherwise they'd be losing money. All right. So if you're not working with us, all right, check with your supplier for updated costs. If they don't say anything, just check with them, proactively check with them, because obviously, like, you don't want to necessarily just go around and asking for higher costs, but if you don't check, potentially you're going to be in for a rude surprise if your cost increases out of nowhere. And we've seen that happen a lot recently to some of the folks that we don't work with. All right, so check with them first. All right, and then the other thing is make sure you have enough margin to account for increases. And all right, so look, this point is extremely important. Everyone knows that the Q4 sales season is the best sales season in e-commerce and in retail in general. However, like, it doesn't matter if your margins don't make sense. All right. So this is not a time that you should be like running at like just razor thin margins. This is not a time you should be running at break even. If you're honestly running at break even right now, even before these price increases, and you don't really have any signs of that scaling up, you don't have any signs that you could actually make that profitable, or you can't make that profitable, then I would seriously reconsider if this is something, a product or brand that you can actually safely scale through Q4. All right. Because the thing is, if you don't have enough margin to account for these increases, and expected increases, which is currently unknown, then you're going to potentially have a huge issue where you could be selling a lot of units, and then potentially after the fact, you're not going to be able to send them out. All right. So let me actually tell you guys an anecdote about what happened last year during COVID. COVID last year caused a huge amount of very significant increases. And we're talking about like $10 per kilogram sometimes in various countries. And sometimes they were going on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis. And what happened was that as many of you might remember, during that period, there was also a huge e-commerce boom. And one of the things that was actually booming very hard was indoor fitness products. And I won't talk about the specific products. I don't want to share products, but indoor fitness, for example, was a huge boom last year. But indoor fitness products And maybe you probably know what I'm talking about, but those kind of products are actually quite heavy, and which means that they're highly sensitive to shipping prices. So what happened last year was that those indoors fitness products boomed. All right. However, the problem was that as the shipping prices increased, when we were having potential clients reaching out to us for quotes, they were saying, hey, these quotes are higher than expected. And we told them, well, it's because shipping prices just increased like twice in the last 2 weeks. And some of these folks, they just sat on it. They were trying to look for additional comparison quotes. They were hoping that things would stabilize, and it did not stabilize. It only got worse and worse and worse, and no other supplier can do anything about it. And what ended up happening is that a lot of folks, at least the responsible store owners, they actually had to fulfill the orders at a loss. All right. Now, somewhat less responsible store owners, I don't know what they did actually. I'm not going to make any assumptions, but I would expect that there were a certain large amount of businesses that literally would go bankrupt fulfilling these orders, and therefore they may not have just fulfilled them, right? Now, obviously, COVID last year is definitely very unique. The price increases are not going to be that extreme. However, this is the point, right? Make sure that you have enough margin room to account for the increases and to expect more increases going forward, especially if you have a heavier product, or otherwise you are going to risk, you might actually risk, otherwise you might risk losing money on fulfillment. All right, and obviously you do not want to do this. All right, now the other thing is make sure you plan your supply chain now for scaling. All right, so that's going to be the topic of the next half of this webinar. We like this becomes ever more important because if you run out of stock and have to delay for days or weeks, you could be facing higher price increases during that time. All right, so this is actually incredibly important when you think about these price increases. All right, because the thing is, like, whether it's us, whether it's any supplier that you use, any 3PL fulfillment agent you use, the prices are active from the date that they actually change. There's no such thing as your agent guaranteeing you the price, for the entire quarter. It just doesn't work like that, which means that if you do not plan for your supply chain, if you do not pre-stock, and there could be situations where you might have hundreds or thousands of orders backed up, and because there is, say, a 5-day delay because you have to get more stock with your supplier, then in the middle there is a big price increase, then immediately you could be losing a ton of money on your margin. All right, because you made the sales, the orders were sold, you assumed a certain margin given the prices at the current time, but obviously as they actually get sent out, the prices increase, and therefore you're going to just unnecessarily lose money, as opposed to if you were actually planning ahead and pre-stocking at the start. All right, so this is going to be generally the shipping prices update. One good news though is that, okay, so one thing that I will add here though is that good news, shipping times have still stayed stable recently. All right, so this is going to be a point that I will start talking more and more about as we go deeper into peak holiday season, because shipping times, they do typically get less consistent as we go into late November and early December as well. However, right now the shipping times, as according to our data, have stayed pretty stable, similar to through the entire year, which means that this is still good news, but I'll keep everyone updated on this. All right, so in the future, in these webinars, if there are price increases, if there are shipping time, delivery time updates, I will definitely start and update everyone on this piece. All right, so make sure to watch these webinars if you are interested on these most pressing updates. All right, so now let's talk about what you should be doing now to prepare for the holiday sales on the supply chain side. All right, so let me see. All right, so first of all, okay. So we do have modules on this in our free course. It's totally free. Just comment course below in the comments here. And our very nice Camilla is going to be able to send you a link for that. So, check that out for more detailed modules on how you should think about Q4 supply chain planning in general. And actually, you know what, let me actually just open it up as well, so I can kind of point everyone to what modules you might want to be looking at. All right, so here's the course that we have. All right, so it's divided into these parts, starting out drop shipping, scaling up to 6 figures and scaling to 7 figures and building a sustainable business. So in terms of Q4 supply chain planning, you want to really focus on a couple of modules. So first, you definitely want to start with some of the basics. You want to first understand how the production process works. This is a whole module like going into detail on how it works in general. And then you want to talk about, and then you want to look at inventory planning for scaling as well. So these two are the foundations of how you should think about supply chain planning in general. And then the main module on this is check out the advanced Q4 China supply chain planning. And actually, we actually have a outline here as well. So definitely check through this. I'm not going to go through this whole outline because it's probably better if you actually just look in the course because it's going to be too detailed, but definitely check through this, what you should be considering, and also how we think about how you should be thinking about things on a period by period basis as things actually change. All right, so now let's talk about right now. What do you want to be doing right now? And yeah, by the way, if anyone has any questions, please definitely comment below and I will answer them as I see them. All right, so first point is start scaling as much as possible right now, right? So this is so important. First of all, it's the start of the sales season. So it's the appropriate time, right? But more importantly is that you want more confidence in your marketing, ROAS, number of orders per day projections. All right. So the thing is, like, this is the period right now when you need to validate your product, you need to validate your brand, you need to validate your marketing, you need to validate your targeting, your creatives, right? Black Friday, Cyber Monday, obviously is kind of peak sales season, but you're not going to be prepared. You're not going to be prepared if that is when you first start, right? So now is when you want to be scaling up as much as possible. And the other thing as well is Facebook, PayPal don't like big unexpected spikes. All right, so I might not have to say too much about this. I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this already. But for example, if you have a relatively new PayPal account or a PayPal account that hasn't really had too many purchases and all of a sudden it spikes up, like say Black Friday, then almost certainly you're going to get like a PayPal hold and you're going to have cash flow issues, right? And this is something that you definitely want to start scaling up in advance. Most likely, honestly, like if it's a new PayPal account, they're still going to hold some money, ask you some questions and provide proof, documentation, supplier invoices and things like that. However, you want to do that early, right? You want to do that now. You want to get a PayPal hold right now so you can deal with it so that you can scale successfully and not have as many course flow issues as we go into the major peak Black Friday and beyond. All right, so pick your winners and cut out the rest. All right, so this is so important. And by the way, I am planning actually some content on this about this whole concept of just like thinking about your SKUs and reducing SKUs. All right, so first point here is that more SKUs is not always good. Many times it's not good and actually reduces conversion. All right, so this is sometimes counterintuitive, especially for drop shippers, right? You look at AliExpress, you look at any random product, and this is something that I feel like factories and and AliExpress sellers don't tend to get quite as much in that like they tend to feel like for a certain product they want to offer as many different colors as possible, as many different designs as possible. But the thing is, like, that is not necessarily a good thing. Just because you're, say, using AliExpress or using CJ, or just because you know that there is a whole bunch of different SKUs out there, a whole bunch of different colors out there, it is not always a good thing. If there is no functional need for too many SKUs, then there's been a lot of research showing that it actually has the counteractive effect. It actually it makes decisions harder for consumers. All right. Now, what I mean by functional differences, all right. So functional differences are things like, okay, you're selling shoes. All right. You have one color of shoes, but the thing is, like, if you're not going to have enough sizes, you're not going to have all the sizes, obviously, like, it's impossible to sell to most people with different size feet. So that's a functional, that is like a functionally important SKU difference. However, if you're selling, some generic product, so here are some, AirPods, for example, right? I mean, I don't even know if Apple actually sells like these AirPods in too many different colors. I mean, I only know white, really. But the thing is, like selling these AirPods in, like, 10 different colors, it's not good. I mean, it doesn't really matter. And what it does, especially if you're not Apple, by the way, I mean, obviously, look, if you're Apple, like, you're going to want to buy AirPods anyways, right? But if you are more of a e-commerce brand and maybe you're not like a well-known brand, then what tends to happen is that consumers actually, they look at all of these colors, they look at all of these designs, and it actually makes a decision for them harder. And actually it tends to reduce the conversion rate if the decisions don't actually matter. And again, there's been a lot of research done in this in traditional retail. But the other thing that's very important is more SKUs makes inventory management much more difficult. All right. Think about it this way. If you have one winning product and just one single SKU, let's just say these AirPods or, fake AirPods. Oh, by the way, don't sell fake AirPods anymore because Apple's going after you. But if you just have one SKU, then it's such an easy calculation to say, okay, I have 100 orders per day and the lead time is like 4 days. And okay, let's pre-stock maybe 7 days of inventory. So let's pre-stock 700 units at a time. And that's just on one SKU, right? Now, imagine if you had 10 different SKUs and they're all selling at potentially different rates. And that essentially makes the problem, I mean, it's more than 10 times more difficult, right? Because then it's not just like, simple math anymore, because also like how your customers purchase these SKUs are also going to be quite unpredictable as well. And having more SKUs increases that variance and just makes inventory management much more difficult, makes pre-stocking much more difficult in general. All right. The other thing here, so I'll put a note here is that, like, if you are selling a bunch of SKUs, most likely, most of your sales are from a small number. Remember the 80-20 rule, all right? The 80-20 rule is an oversimplification, but, a lot of times you actually do see, like, maybe 20% of your SKUs actually are making up 80% plus of your sales, right? And then the other thing as well is, let's talk about stuff like upsells or cross sells, stuff that you just fill up your store with, all right? Cross sells, upsells, that don't make a huge difference in your AOV will really disrupt your supply chain. All right, unless you pre-stock them. All right. So the thing is, like, a lot of folks, they like during normal times, they fill out their broad niche store, maybe general store, with a whole bunch of different products. And once in a while, a product sells, and generally speaking, it increases the AOV, right? But the thing is, like, unless they make a huge difference, right? I mean, like, what I mean here is that obviously sometimes you're gonna have like upsells that make up like 10% of your orders, right? That is something that makes sense for you to pre-stock, right? If you do 100 orders per day and you 10 orders per day of the upsell, then might as well pre-stock that upsell anyways, right? But just anything else on your store, like stuff that you're testing, stuff that just didn't work, just like this is gonna really disrupt your supply chain, because unless you pre-stock it, and honestly, if you're just selling one unit like once in a while, it doesn't make sense for you to pre-stock. It's gonna make it so that your main winners could be disrupted by slower processing, shipping of the other products. All right. So unless you have stock of the other products, you're going to potentially face a situation where, I mean, think about it this way, right? Your customers, obviously, they don't really know most likely what you're doing, right? You might be working with an agent for your main winner and maybe using something like AliExpress or CJ for these random one-off orders, right? Obviously, they don't realize that. So if they pick something random and put it into their cart and then purchase it, they're just going to expect it's going to come at the same time. And then your main product, actually, I mean, well, here's where you decide. It either gets sent separately, obviously, or it gets bundled together, and both have issues. If you bundle it together, then your main product has to wait for the additional product to even ship out. Or if you separate it, then your customers are going to get the main product, but they'll be like, oh, where is the additional product? Why is this additional product taking 3 weeks longer? And they could be perfectly happy with your main product. However, they get pissed off because there's something else they ordered that they obviously want as well, and maybe have expected it for Christmas. They're not going to arrive on time, and Facebook feedback survey is going to come, and they're going to say it didn't arrive, and that's going to kill your feedback store. All right. So what I would definitely suggest here is just like, take these off your store, mark them as sold out, or pre-stock. All right. I mean, if you want to pre-stock, it's totally fine. Like if you have a long tail of products they only sell once in a while, but you really want to have a better customer experience, then you might just want to pre-stock like 10, 20 of them, then you wouldn't have this problem. But I don't know, like some folks have like 50 different products and most of them don't sell. I don't know if you actually want to pre-stock all of them. All right. Okay. So, and then plan your Q4 now, right? I mean, this is something that plan your scaling strategy, Black Friday CM, etc. Right? ASAP, right? Look, you're never going to be able to exactly know what is going to happen in terms of the actual effects of your marketing, but you need to have some kind of plan. You need to have some kind of plan in place, because this is also important as well. Communicate with your supplier on these plans so they can plan ahead. Communicate with factory. Okay. Actually, this is on this piece as well, but this is actually really important. If you have a Q4 sales strategy in general, and like, you should really communicate with your supplier on it so that they know about it. They know, we know how to resource accordingly. We want to make sure that we have space. We have to make sure that we have enough people. We have to make sure that the factories can actually produce as fast as possible. All right. This is also really important. You got to determine your risk profile right now. Now, what I mean is, generally speaking, it's like, do you want to risk overstocking to achieve to target better processing time? Or do you want to risk overselling with risk of delays or having to pause marketing? All right. So this is so important to think right now, because the thing is, right, like I said, with this Q4 sales strategy is you're not going to be able to know exactly how many orders per day that you are going to get, going into late November, right? You're just not really going to know that. And so this is where there's going to be uncertainty in the future, right? Now, uncertainty in the future, you have to deal with. I mean, it is what it is, right? Honestly, if you can perfectly predict how many orders you're going to sell, like, what your marketing performance is, like, that's going to be a superhuman power, in this industry. But because you can't do that, you got to determine your risk profile in light of uncertainty, right? And the two ways you want to think about it is, do you want to risk overstocking? Do you want to maybe risk a little bit more aggressive stocking? And this is going to depend on your factory capacity, your lead time situation. If you want to say, okay, like throughout the entire Q4, you want to be able to process as fast as possible, maybe within 24 hours, and ship out as fast as possible. And by the way, this becomes even more important getting close to Christmas, and we'll talk about that in a future webinar. Now, obviously, the risk here, though, is that you might lose money on unsold stock. All right. There's an obvious risk here, and this is potentially costly. Right. Now, the other risk, though, is that you want to risk running out, right? Overselling your stock and causing potentially significant delays in your processing because you're just out of stock, and it might take 1 week, maybe 2 weeks to get stock again to fulfill the orders. Or you might even have to pause marketing. Maybe like you just didn't plan ahead, you completely out of stock, you can't get more stock in 2 or 3 weeks, and that stock is not going to be arrived in time for Christmas, and maybe you just have to say you literally have to pause marketing. And the thing is, though, risk of this is potential customer issues, refunds, if delayed, but also opportunity costs. All right, leaving money on the table. This is where, look, I think that obviously when you think about it directly, this risk sucks, right? This is a more direct, intangible financial risk to you, because if you have a bunch of units you can't sell out, and maybe it's more of a Christmas gift product, and you can't really sell it next year, then the risk is that you could actually just lose money here, right? But I think one thing that everyone has to consider is that this risk can be really, really costly as well if you have a scaling store, if you have a very, very promising product. Because if you don't stock enough, and if you're not careful, you could actually get a lot of refunds, right? Because of these delays. And like if you don't know about these delays. However, the main thing is opportunity cost, right? Every single year we see a lot of folks, they do not plan ahead, and they have a massive product, massive numbers, but they just don't have any more stock. And the responsible thing to do at that point is probably actually stop selling, which means you could potentially be putting a lot of money on the table. It could be 6 figures, sometimes it could be even 7 figures if you miss out on this period, all right? So this is also a cost as well. Now, there's a reason why it's called risk, right? Neither of these are good, right? I mean, there's no such thing as perfectly planning for stock in this period, especially because factories are going to have longer lead times, and it's not going to be something that, maybe some of these products that you normally can get, your supplier can get from the factory in 2 days, maybe that drags on to 5 days or 7 days. And because of that, you have to consider these options. Which one do you choose? And you want to consider it now. All right. Now, the next thing is going to be communicating with your suppliers and factories. All right. Make sure to let your suppliers know your marketing plans before you scale up, and keep them updated all the time on significant changes up and down, so they can plan accordingly on stock purchasing for you, assuming that they are purchasing stock and pre-stocking for you. All right. This is something that, again, you're never really exactly going to know like how your marketing activities are actually going to affect your orders per day. However, you're going to know if you're going to scale up, right? You do know that. And this is where if you're going at a steady order volume per day, 50 orders per day, for example, and your supplier plans for 200 units, because that's all you really need, because maybe it's like a 3-day lead time. And then you scale up and you sell 200 units the next day, and then you're immediately out, and then your supplier has to keep up, right? If that happens, by the way, like, you can't blame your supplier for that, right? Your supplier only sees your orders after they come in, but when you start scaling your marketing up or down. So communicate with your suppliers on this. Now this is actually where, actually, I mean, I think probably before this point, to be honest, is work with a trusted agent, supplier, or partner for Q4. All right. Do not drop ship in the traditional way. All right. So, some of you guys, if you're kind of using maybe like AliExpress or, maybe CJ or like a more traditional dropshipping platform, you might be thinking like, oh, how do we do this? I mean, I'm talking to them, but I'm not even sure if they're actually going to react accordingly. I'm not really sure if they're going to be doing the right things. Well, to be fair, it is very possible that this doesn't really do anything if you don't actually work with a good agent, a good supplier, a good partner for Q4. All right. Do not drop ship in the traditional way. Do not use like AliExpress. Do not use like something like CJ, unless like you have a big account with CJ and you definitely pre-stock and you pay up front. That could also work as well. But do not drop ship in the traditional way for Q4, because there's going to be so much just so many supply chain issues because they're just not well equipped to actually plan accordingly. All right. So make sure your suppliers in your part, and then make sure your suppliers start communicating with factories now. Lead times, capacity, demand. All right. So for us at EcommOps, you've been actually talking with factories for our clients like for the last month, basically. All right. We check with them, are the lead times changing? And probably they are. How do we plan accordingly? What is their maximum capacity? If a client wants to scale up to 1,000 units per day, can you actually make 1,000 units per day for us, right? Is there a lot of other demand for this product from the factory as well? Because, let's say their capacity is 1,000 units per day, but there's like all these other dropshippers trying to get that capacity as well, then it doesn't actually mean their available capacity is 1,000 units per day. Now, there's a lot of things that we can actually do if it's communicated in advance. We can do stuff like reserve the entire factory. We can do stuff like find second or third factories to support that. We've done that before. We've done products that do like 5,000-10,000 units per day, and literally one factory can't handle it. So we've had like 3 factories with like 200 people working on the same product just to actually achieve that demand. All right. But make sure that your suppliers actually communicate with the factories so that they can plan for your scaling. And look, the other thing as well is that if I would assume that at least some of you here might be thinking, oh, like I've never hit like 500 orders per day. I don't know if it even makes sense for me to think about it. I mean, look, guys, like if you have like, say 30, 50 orders per day, and you can't like imagine that you might peak up at like 500,000 orders per day, like don't think that way, because first of all, you're in this business probably for the high end potential, right? You want to make it big, you want to scale up big. So don't don't limit yourself by thinking that, oh, there's no way I can 10x my sales. And the thing is, it happens. It happens every single year. We've, over the years, we've had many clients who just come to us like I have no idea what happened. I had no idea that this product can scale up to 1,000 units per day. I had no idea. I cranked it up and I did not know it was going to work. And, we had situations when it was literally like the first winning product, the first time they ever scaled. And all of a sudden they were hitting like 800 orders, 1,000 orders per day on that one product. So trust me, guys, like if you guys first of all, don't limit yourselves in what could happen in Q4. Q4 is a crazy period. The mad holiday rush, I think, is going to be even more intense this year. It's going to do crazy things potentially to your sales, and therefore is don't limit yourself and also plan for the potential to scale that high up, because you do not want a situation where that takes you by surprise and it takes your suppliers and the factories even more by surprise because stuff needs time to get made. All right. So make sure you start communicating these right now, if you're planning to scale up. All right. So you also want to set up the right customer messaging strategy. This is something that I would definitely talk about more in detail, when we actually get deeper into Q4, shipping times communication strategy, right? So this is less so about like the marketing side, be clear, be very clear about shipping processing times. All right, be very realistic about this. Now, in Q4, in the holiday sales season, and if they can get it by Xmas, right? During this period, faster shipping gets a little bit less important, especially this year. I mean, I'm talking about like, promising like, 5 to 8 day shipping, for example, right? Which the express lines can usually support during normal years, right? But if you start seeing delays, if your supplier starts telling you there's going to be delays, just be very clear. Just say, hey, because of high demand, processing times are this and shipping times are this. Particularly for holiday sales, people are going to be more understanding of that, and particularly this year because everything is getting delayed. However, you got to be very careful to say that, especially later on, you got to be clear if something is going to arrive by Christmas or not by Christmas. All right, but be very clear about this. And here's a pro tip: is set shipping zones by country and specify shipping time expectations for each in Shopify. All right, so this is actually something that is an important practice. I mean, not only in terms of just Q4 sales, but honestly, in terms of usual sales as well, right? In Shopify, you can actually set shipping zones by, country, groupings of countries, even by like specific states, for example, in the US. And this is actually a super simple way to be able to set shipping expectations at checkout without having to have a general shipping timeline for all countries, which is definitely not going to be the case. Or kind of having like a whole list of like, okay, like US this this time, UK this time, for example. Let me actually just kind of show you generally. Here is actually our Cody Pillar Learning storefront. So I'll just kind of show you a few examples, right? So we actually already know that certain countries have different shipping expectations as well, right? So, Australia has been a little bit on the slower side. New Zealand's pretty fast. Singapore is pretty fast. UAE, UK is very fast, right? So see, by doing this, we set a different shipping expectation for each country. So that, so I'll give you an example, right? Like if you're just looking at this, then like if you're like estimating like just one single time frame, you probably want to do, okay, like I don't know, 5 to 21 days. I mean, that's a very long time frame, right? But if you do it this way, you're honest with the Australian customers that it could be up to 21 days, in this period. Actually, it's probably a little bit shorter than that, but we just want to be safe because Cody is a kid's product and we just want to be extra generous in that. But then like you can set that expectations for certain countries that are slower, but the UK, like, we're 100% confident, like 99% confident that things will get there in 4 to 10 days, actually mostly in 4 to 8 days, right? So when you do it like this, you set the right expectations for customers, but you also don't potentially lose on conversions for the countries that actually have faster shipping speeds as well. All right. So this is something that I recommend you do, especially for Q4, but I think that, this is a useful exercise for normal sales periods as well. All right. So, and then I think that consider, shipping messaging flows to update customers when it's shipped out, expectations on delivery. All right. So one app that is highly recommended, and it's something that actually Gabriel St. Germain uses, is Checkout Rush app. I haven't used it too much personally, but it does come out highly recommended by a lot of folks. It helps providing with a branded tracking page and also customized update flows as well. And I think that this is a really great way for you to make sure that your customers are as updated as possible on shipping speeds. And I think this is something that, one thing that I always say to everyone is that customers, they normally don't get pissed off just because it might be a little bit slower, there might be slight issues, right? They get really pissed off when they think that you lied to them. All right. They get really pissed off when they think that you're not communicating with them, right? Like if you have, overly communicative flows, then the vast majority of your customers, they're going to understand, and they're going to be appreciative as well, most likely. All right. And then the other important thing, and this gets more and more important as we get deeper, is normal times, Yunexpress ordinary, 4px basic lines. Let's see, what else could it be? Even some ePacket. ePacket is, I'm actually going to remove ePacket here. ePacket these days are still not good. Are fine and are cheaper, and maybe just 1 to 3 days slower than faster lines. All right. So this is actually fine for normal times. However, these lines have lowest priority and use the cheapest, less consistent last mile delivery. All right, which means they can get much less consistent during peak. All right, so this is going to be a problem when we're thinking about Q4. Now, I'm not going to guarantee you that this is going to just start getting way slower than the faster lines, because it really depends on supply and demand. However, just on average, if anything happens, if anything gets slower, these lines are going to get slower. All right, so make sure that you remember that, because during, let's say, during peak sales season, end of November, early December, Yunexpress regular, especially Yunexpress Express are going to be much more stable, though more expensive. All right, so this is where you're going to have to make a choice. Because what this means, and be aware of expected excess shipping cutoffs for each. All right, so this is something that we'll update through these webinars and posts as well. All right, as we go into the sales season, these lines are going to get slower and slower, or we expect it to get slower and slower, and we're going to announce what our expected shipping cutoffs are going to be for each, and generally by country as well, right? So then, for example, you want to be able to make a decision to if you want to upgrade for higher cost, but extend your sales period. All right, so Black Friday, Cyber Monday is coming up, right? That is probably going to be your peak sales, especially if you run a Black Friday sale. However, from Black Friday and on, all the way through Christmas, that's still a major sales period as well. And if your product is crushing it and you have great margins, you want to extend those sales as late as possible, as long as they can arrive by Christmas, assuming that you're guaranteeing that. And obviously, if you guarantee Christmas delivery, you're going to get, higher conversions during that period as well, right? And this is where you want to be like very, very careful about your margins. You want to think about, okay, the Yunexpress ordinary cutoff date is, I'm just throwing out random numbers right now. It's not exactly going to be like this, but let's just say it's going to be like December 1st, right? But if you use a Yunexpress express line, maybe you can actually ship for, 8 to 10 more days and still safely get it in time for Christmas. However, it's, quite a bit more expensive. It's like, 20% more expensive, right? You obviously want to make a decision if it actually makes sense for your margins to just eat the cost of the faster lines in order to sell for an extra week, for example. And that extra week, still during kind of peak holiday sales period, it could be extremely, extremely, it could be extremely huge difference maker in terms of your sales for the period. I mean, we have many clients who might make 6 figures or more in a single week period, probably 7 figures actually sometimes in a single week period, right? So this is actually why you want to be considerate of this, and if you want to upgrade for higher costs. All right, well, we're actually okay, so we're actually on time right now for the hour. I'll just pause for a minute here, and if anyone has any questions here, just comment below. All right, so I think we're all good. Yeah, so again, we're gonna, we have these notes, so if you want these notes, just comment notes below, and then we'll send it out to you. I'm gonna send the live link to this as well, so you have the recording. And as a reminder, we're gonna be holding this every single week, Wednesday, 11 a.m. US Eastern time, through Q4 for these regular webinars. By the way, next week is daylight saving. Well, it's the reversal of daylight savings time in the US. So this is US time. So depending on what time zone you are on, you might be an hour off. All right. So just make sure to adjust your calendars accordingly. And next week, we might actually have a quite interesting topic. If you want to join, is we might actually bring in an expert in Facebook accounts, Facebook BMs, who's going to talk to us about how you should think about like just managing your Facebook accounts effectively, especially when you're scaling through Q4, because I know a lot of people are having Facebook account issues recently. All right, well, thank you everyone. It's been fun. Again, this is Dayu. Thank you for joining this webinar. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.